So we've been in this relationship series, Relationships, and we're talking about dating, and we talked about sex, and we talked about marriage. And the one thing that we didn't put on there that we are talking about tonight is purity. And so, like I said, the doors are closed. This is a conversation that is catered to where you guys are at. We're going to be talking specifically a lot about the topic of pornography, and that is something that you are hopefully at least familiar with the concept of, but this is sort of a heavy topic in the sense that it's not just like all fun and games. Like there's a lot of fun to be had in relationships and marriage and even sex. God designed these things for our enjoyment, for our pleasure, and that's such a beautiful and good thing. But pornography and purity can sometimes take a little bit of a heavier or a different turn when we're talking about this from a Christian and a church perspective. Like, what are we supposed to do with the topic of staying pure, especially as we're not married yet and we're navigating our way through high school and we're trying to figure out what does God want us to do with our life now. So this series, this topic is kind of serious. And what I want to start out with is just giving you some statistics on what is going on with pornography in middle school, high school, and you'll see that on the next slide. So Gabe, you can throw it up there. So here's some stats on pornography exposure and use. So number one, most kids today are exposed to pornography by the age of 13, with 84.4% of males and 57% of females ages 14 to 18. That's you guys, you're in high school, having viewed pornography at some point in your life. So statistically, what I want to even start out with is just laying it on the table and saying most, if not potentially every single person in this room has been exposed to pornography at some point. And a big theme as we walk through this conversation is going to be the idea that we're not alone. Like, you are not alone. You might think there's a lot of stuff that I've seen or done or experienced, and maybe I'm just walking down this road and I don't know who to talk to. Well, I want to help you see that statistically, most every other person in the room is walking down a similar road that you're walking down and experiencing similar things, because we're all living in this world together, and I want to bring that into the light tonight. So that's number one. Number two is this. In a 2023 study, so even just this past year, all participants reported that they were exposed to porn by the age of 12. Every single person in this study in 2023 said that they had been exposed at least by the age of 12. So that's like middle school right there. Another 15% said that they saw it for the first time when they were 10 years old or younger. Most teenagers, 73%, reported that they had at least consumed some amount of pornography. Next, number three, 53% of boys and 39% of girls believe that pornography is a realistic depiction of sex. So what I want you to see from this is even just that there is this idea of pornography out there online, these images and videos that you can watch, and this is a real life portrayal of what actually goes on in maybe what you would consider a healthy marriage relationship, and that is not the case. It is not true, but so many people say, well, that's probably what it's like, right? Because that's like, this is a video that I'm watching, and this is what sex is really like, but it's just not the case. Number four, overall, 30% of all teens, 41% of the teens who said that they had been exposed to pornography reported that they had been exposed during the school day, at school. Most teens, 60%, reported that they saw it several times a month, and 40% said that they saw it at school weekly, for some from school-issued devices. So going to school, maybe this is your defense for being homeschooled. If you're in the homeschool group, you're like, I don't go to school, I just stay home all day. But all I'm saying here is that statistically, just going to school is a place that is not necessarily safe from pornography itself. Even school-issued devices are not safe from being exposed to pornography. So, yes, okay, so this is a serious topic, but then the question is, how serious really is this issue? And I want to give you three, core reasons, and you might say, well, there's other reasons, but I want to give you three core reasons why pornography is concerning that are not related to the Bible or Christianity or God or anything that we focus on here at church. Three core reasons why this exposure and this thing that's out there in the world is a concern in the world, not just in the church. And so I think sometimes we talk about things at church from the perspective of the Bible, but we also need to recognize that we're not the only ones that are concerned about this. This is a problem in the world. And a big question that I had when I was in high school, and maybe you're asking the same question as this: why is it such a big deal if I look at pornography? Or is it really that bad of a thing? Is it that harmful to myself or to other people? And I didn't have a good answer to that. And I want to hopefully give you a better answer than I had when I was sitting where you are sitting tonight. So the answer is yes, it is harmful, it is concerning, and here's why. Reason number one, it replaces, so 3 reasons why pornography is so destructive. It replaces our ability to enjoy real romance and real sex. So porn, think about this. I was thinking about this analogy as I was prepping for this talk tonight. If you are, how many of you have ever had a fruit snack in your life? Okay, great. If you haven't raised your hand, I know you're lying, because they're amazing, unless you're allergic to something. So if you have a fruit snack, it's kind of like a replacement for fruit, right? Or let's say, how many of you like orange Fanta as like the drink? Yeah, great, right? It's a good soda. Or like fruit punch Gatorade or lemon lime or something like that. These are like things that taste like things that really exist. You see where I'm going with this? So if you have like fruit snacks or orange Fanta or Gatorade, they taste like real fruit, but they're packed with a bunch of sugar and other things that are not necessarily good for you to be consuming. And so they're filling you with all this sugar and stuff that's not great. And when you start to eat those things, you actually start to realize that you lose the taste for the real thing. So if you have like an orange flavored Fanta and then you immediately bite into an orange after it, the orange will taste bland and like not worthwhile. It'd be like, oh, like I don't like going back to the real thing because this thing that's full of sugar is so much more tasty and delightful in this moment as I'm comparing them next to each other. You want that fake sugary thing rather than the like nourishing crisp bite that an apple can provide, or a banana or an orange, the real fruit. Pornography is kind of the same thing. It's like, it seems like it's a real experience that you're having, and it might feel good in a certain way to like consume it, but the reality that we don't necessarily always see, it's that it's eroding us from the inside out, and it's not actually nourishing us in the way that, like, again, a real fruit might nourish us, but we are taking something that's a substitute, something that tastes sweet in the moment. We're not realizing what it's doing to us in a harmful way. So same thing. So like when we consume porn, if we consume pornography, we stop wanting the real thing. Sex, love, and connection from like a real human being become this thing that feels less desirable because we're having this thing that we're experiencing, this other thing that feels so much more desirable, and it leaves us kind of empty afterwards. We don't find gratification from something that can actually nourish us or provide good mental health and emotional health by being close to another person. We are left isolated and on our own, and pornography doesn't provide anything of value to us. So it replaces our ability to enjoy real romance and real sex. And there's a quote that I want to show you too. It can take our brain's natural stimuli, our desire for intimacy and connection, our longing to feel strong or desirable in our relationships. It can take our interest in a particular feature or activity, and then gives us more quantity, more exaggerated, and more quote-unquote super normal versions of that thing until it can override what we think is normal. So again, think of like the Fanta as like an override of what an orange should taste like. It'll override what we think is normal, warp what we perceive as exciting, and make real intimacy seem less interesting by comparison. So again, pornography might seem enticing in some way, but it really leaves us empty and with something of no substance at the end of the day. It can't bring any sense of true meaning like a relationship with another human being can. So it can really harm us. And there's so much research done on this that I can't really dive into tonight, but just the mental and emotional and even just spiritual stability that you can have as you walk through life is just undercut by consuming pornography. So moving on. That's concern number one, maybe a reason why pornography is destructive. It's really destructive for you as a healthy individual as you walk through life. Number two, it destroys your relationship with your romantic partner. And I might even add to this, if you want to write down any notes, it destroys your romantic partner. So it'll destroy your relationship and it'll destroy them also. And here's what I'll say about this. Having to have a conversation with Karina, when I had a conversation with her back when we were in college, and I had first met her and we were going to start dating, I was like, I should probably tell her that this is something, like I'm not like Superman or something. I have looked at pornography, and I had to confess that to Karina and say, this is something that I have done. It's one of the hardest conversations that I've ever had in my life. And it's probably one of the hardest conversations that she's had to have in her entire life. This person that she's interested in dating is confessing to her this thing that is hard to navigate and walk through. And so I want to warn you guys that as you look at potentially being in a relationship or in a marriage in the future, this is one of the number one things that will destroy your relationship, and it will destroy your partner as a result. And here's another quote, which says this: partners of porn consumers also report negative effects such as lower self-esteem. So you might think, well, does this really have any negative side effects? Well, statistically, yes, it does. If you are engaging in consumption of pornography, it will lower the self-esteem of your spouse. It'll worsen the relationship quality of your relationship, and it'll bring them less sexual satisfaction if you're married. All of these things will just devastate your relationship with your wife in the future. Research also suggests that porn consumption can undermine trust in a relationship and fuel couple conflict between you and your spouse. Obviously, relationship problems like these are not new, and they're not solely caused by porn. So you might say, well, there's problems in marriages anyways, which is true, but pornography only serves to speed up the process of causing a rift between you and your spouse and just cause tension and fighting and whatever else can show up. So it says, yes, yet research shows that porn can play a substantial role in fueling these issues, and that's not something that should be ignored. So we need to be cautious of this. So if I put this another way, here's what I'll say. If you want to destroy a future relationship and marriage, a guaranteed way to do that is to develop a pornography habit. Guaranteed. The only thing that it does is destroy a relationship. It is not helpful for a relationship. It's not helpful for a marriage in any way. And if you want to have a healthy relationship with a woman romantically, pornography is only going to get in the way of that, and it's going to cause potential even feelings of guilt and shame if you're continuing to walk in it and try and have this part of your life that exists over here and also have a relationship. And maybe if it's like, well, I should probably just keep this secret, then it's like you're keeping secrets from this person who you want to be open and vulnerable with, and it just causes problems. So it destroys your relationship with your romantic partner, can also destroy them, their self-esteem, their well-being, as well as yours. Number 3, and this is probably the hardest one, is that porn industry is fueling sex trafficking and sexual violence. And this is just put a period at the end of that sentence. There's nothing else to say. I read a lot as I was prepping for this. I was thinking, is it worth sharing any specific anecdotes or stories? And I don't really know if it is, because I don't know where all of you guys are coming from. But what I'll say is that there's really no biblical need to defend this point at all. If you're a human being and you live, especially in America, we understand this is a problem. If you don't understand that this is a problem, I have further questions for you. Women and men across the world and in America are being exploited sexually for profit by the millions, and many of these people who are being exploited sexually are children. One stat I saw said that 21% of the people who are experiencing or suffering from sex trafficking are children under the age of 18. If you're not familiar with what sex trafficking is, it's the act of buying or selling someone, another human, for the purpose of sexual gratification. You can think of that sex trafficking as a subset of human trafficking, which is the buying or selling of another human for profit just in general. That's a simple definition. But think about slavery is a form of human trafficking, and a subcategory of that is sex trafficking, buying or selling for the purpose of sexual gratification. There's a quote here that I'll give you too, which says this: "The fact of the matter is that sex trafficking in porn is a much bigger issue than people realize." We might not realize this. According to cases reported to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, pornography was the 3rd most common form of sex trafficking. So of all the cases that are being reported, you might think, well, pornography is not like that big of an issue because people are consenting to make pornography or to say like, yeah, I'm okay with this. But that's really not the case. It's one of the highest forms of trafficking. And here is another concern. You might say like, well, if I have ever looked at pornography, I'm not looking at the types of pornography that would be considered sex trafficking. But that is not the case. You cannot assume that, because if you've watched any amount of pornography, you've likely unknowingly contributed to the problem, because this is pretty much a widespread concern. Almost any pornography company that's putting out any sort of videos is engaging in practices that are not kosher, essentially. They're doing things to men and they're doing things to women that are not consensual, and you, by just the act of watching it, are participating in that industry, and it's not good. And so again, I said from the start, this is a heavy topic in the sense that this is not something that we talk about lightly. This is a concerning thing. And what I want you to see is, like, as we talk about this from the perspective of we're here in a church right now, Christians, I think, have pretty much from the start said, this is a concern. We should not be engaging in this kind of activity. We should not be okay with saying, yeah, like, I mean, maybe pornography is okay in certain circumstances. No, it's not good. And it's not good for at least these three reasons. It's detrimental to your mental and emotional health. It's detrimental to any romantic relationships you want to have. And it's detrimental because it's fueling an industry in the world that is exploiting other people. It's just by definition evil when we're talking about things that are going on in the world. And Christians have been saying this. But what I don't want you to go away from here and do is think like, oh, I should go and do something about this right now. I don't want that to be the goal of this message tonight. I don't want you to think I should go start like a ministry or go jump on board with a ministry that's fighting sex trafficking or that's taking a stand against pornography. That's really great if you do want to do that with your life. But what I want you to walk away with tonight is recognizing that the solution starts with you in your own personal life. The decisions that you are making are going to make more of a difference down the road for you and for your community than you trying to change things out in the world now. Jesus says, if you want to change, or if you want to take the speck out of your brother's eye or your friend's eye, you need to first take the log out of your own eye. So if you want to go stop the problem out in the world, you should stop the problem in your own heart and in your own life now. So the best place to start is with your own life. Be the change that you want to see out in the world. So as we transition here, we'll talk about the Bible and what does the Bible give us as far as a roadmap for how we can navigate this conversation. I have a simple statement for you that Gabe will throw up on the screen too. It says, stop walking in darkness and start walking in the light. It's a very simple principle that the Bible teaches us very clearly. Stop walking in darkness and start walking in the light. And we'll see this taught very clearly in the book of Ephesians chapter 5. So if you are here with a Bible, you can open that up. But we're in Ephesians 5, and I have the verses on the screen too, so you can follow along there as well. And so the first half of this passage, we'll see how Paul, the author, is encouraging us to stop walking in darkness. And then he doesn't just say stop walking in the darkness and like stop sinning and stop doing all these things. He's going to say, here's what you need to now do as a result of what I've just asked you to stop doing. So it's a lot better for us to walk towards something good than just to try and walk away from something that's not good. And so hopefully we've laid the foundation enough to see that even outside the church, this is a big problem. This is a concern in the world just as much as it's a concern here in this room tonight. And Paul is going to give us some things that we can think about. So verse 3, let's start together here. He says, but sexual immorality and all impurity or covetousness must not even be named among you, as is proper among the saints. So let's pause right there. You might be asking, what is sexual immorality? What is impurity? What is covetousness? And so these are three things that he lists that are all kind of tied together. And what I want to give you first is just even an understanding of the word behind the word. So if you're familiar with the Bible at all, you might know that the English words that we see in front of us were translated from originally written Greek text. The Greek word for sexual immorality is this word porneia, which is, maybe you realize, familiar to the word porn or pornography. It's literally the root word where we get the word pornography. It's a perversion or something that's tainted or twisted from the intended purpose. Sexual immorality is anything that's been twisted from the original purpose of sex as God designed it. So anything that is sexually immoral is any sexual activity outside of what God would define a marriage relationship between a man and a woman. And so any sort of lust that we have in our hearts, any sort of viewing of pornography or sex outside of marriage, any of that is categorized under this umbrella of sexual immorality. So that Paul is just saying it. He's not explaining it, he's just saying it. He's like, we assume and we understand that that's where we're coming from. So sexual immorality, impurity, he's just saying anything that's impure, kind of tied in with sexual immorality. Or covetousness, that's a word that we don't normally go around and say, like, I'm coveting this thing right now. But you might relate this to the idea that, like, maybe your buddy has a girlfriend and you're like, wow, she's super attractive. I wish she was mine. Or I wish I was married to that person who's so desirable. Covetousness is like, I want this person or this thing that is not mine, it does not belong to me, but I'm dwelling on it, and maybe I'm even gonna act on it. I'm gonna try and take it for myself. It's coveting, desiring something that is not yours. So all these things are kind of wrapped up in this conversation of this topic of sex that Paul is talking about. So these things must not even be named among you. And you might come to that and think, well, is Paul saying we shouldn't talk about these things? Why are we talking about them? Because we're naming these things and we're talking about them quite a bit right now. What he's really saying here is not that we shouldn't say the words sexual immorality or impurity or covetousness. We should talk about them. But what he's saying is, as Christians, what we need to do is put these things out of our life. They shouldn't be named in our life. So I shouldn't be able to look at my life and say, yeah, this is a part of my life. He's saying, no. Sexual immorality, impurity, covetousness are not proper for Christians to walk in. These are things that we should stop walking in. Like I said earlier, we need to stop walking in darkness. These are things that would be categorized as darkness. Let's keep going. Verse 4. Let there be no filthiness, nor foolish talk, nor crude joking, which are out of place, but instead let there be thanksgiving. So what Paul continues on to say is all of this stuff that you can do with your life, the actions or the things that you do on a daily basis should not include sexual immorality, impurity, covetousness. You also should not be using your mouth to speak things like filthiness or foolish talk or crude joking that are also not becoming of saints or Christians. These are also things that we should not be doing or practicing as Christians. So you might even think, well, I don't maybe look at pornography, but I love telling really inappropriate jokes. Paul's also saying, like, that's in the same category. Using our mouth to say things that either tear people down or degrade maybe women or other guys in our life, or just any number of ways that we could be using our words to, again, say things that are just not glorifying to God, falls in the category of stuff that Paul is saying. We need to set that aside and walk away from it. Stop walking in it. And I'll tell you guys this. I've made so many mistakes in my life. I'm sitting in the same chair that you guys are sitting in. When I was in high school, I said some things to a girl that was a friend of mine that were not appropriate, not good, and I had to come to her and apologize for what I said, essentially. And I almost ruined a friendship with her, but she was gracious enough to forgive me. And she said, you know, Austin, I recognize that you are actually asking for forgiveness, and I know this isn't who you are. And I was so thankful for that. But I said things to this girl that were inappropriate in this way that I think Paul is talking about. And what I want you to see is that, like, at any point, like, something might come out of your mouth that you might actually have to apologize for, or you might realize, like, wow, that was actually not appropriate for this setting or for who I say that I am as a Christian. And so we need to continually be checking ourselves and saying, okay, am I using my mouth to glorify God? Or this says we need to be expressing words with thanksgiving and not tearing people down, but building them up. So Paul is saying, stop doing those types of things, start walking in a different direction. Verses 5 and 6, he says, for you may be sure of this, that everyone who is sexually immoral or impure or covetous, notice that these are the same three things that he labeled at the start of the chapter, or at the start of the verse 3, sexually immoral, impure, and covetousness, that is idolatry. These people have no inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things, the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. What is he saying? Is he saying if you look at pornography, you are no longer welcome in the kingdom of Christ and God? If you have sex before marriage, you have no place in the kingdom of God, AKA you're not going to heaven. The answer is no. And I want to make sure that this is very clear because it can be so easy to come to a passage like this and think, okay, I think I've sinned too much to get into the kingdom of heaven, or I can't go to heaven because I'm already too much of a broken person. And the answer is no, that is not the case. Paul is not saying that if you've ever committed any number of these sins that you're not welcome in the kingdom of heaven. But look at this. He's saying, let no one deceive you with empty words. Don't let people draw you away and say, hey, it's actually okay to look at pornography. Jesus will forgive you. It's okay to just have sex before marriage. Don't worry about it. Don't let people come in and convince you that it's okay to walk in sin, because that's what's going to exclude you from the kingdom of heaven. He's saying, look, if you're living your life and you're fighting sin and you're trying to put sin to death in your life and you're trying to walk towards God, that's the character of somebody who is following God and somebody who has been forgiven by the blood of Christ. Jesus died so that we don't have to worry about our sin anymore. But if you're walking through life and you have any amount of sin that you are aware of and you're not repenting of, that's the thing that excludes you from the kingdom of heaven. If you are defined by sexual immorality, if you're defined by impurity or covetousness, those are the things that he's saying will exclude you from the kingdom of heaven, and you will be someone who's walking in darkness, not walking in light. So let's see. He's going to transition here. Verses 3-6 are a bunch of just like, don't do this, don't do this. These are the things that are not good. But what is he actually asking us to step into? That's what we're going to get to here in verse 7. He says, therefore, do not become partners with those types of people who are going to try to deceive you. For at one time you were darkness. At one time you were darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. So walk as children of light. The fruit of light is found in all that is good and right and true, and try to discern what is pleasing to the Lord. So I think it's interesting that he says, we were darkness. You might think, well, Austin, you said we should not walk in darkness, but Paul is saying you were darkness. We were darkness, and now we are light. We were darkness, now we are light. And then he says, walk in the light. So the question that comes to mind is, if we are now we are light because we are in Christ, why do we need to walk in the light? Like, do we need to do something different than what we already are? And here's maybe an example that will help illustrate this. So I'm going to have Gabe turn the lights off. It's going to get really dark. Thanks, Gabe. Click. All right, so it's dark in the room. I left the stage lights on because I want you to see me. But you might realize the lights are very clearly off. So this is what it's like. Our life is like before we come to Jesus. We meet Jesus, and we are darkness. And then Gabe, hit that one button. It'll turn the lights on. Boom, there you go. You meet Jesus, and now you're light. What do you notice about the lights right now? What'd you say? They're pretty dim, but they're on, right? So you come to Jesus, you show up, and you're like, okay, I'm here. I'm light. But it's not really exciting. It's not great. And then Gabe, hit that other button. It'll turn them on again. When we walk in the light, what happens is we start to grow in our relationship with Jesus, and our existence becomes something so much more glorious. So when Paul says this, what he's saying is, you were darkness and you became light, but just because you're light doesn't mean you're there yet. Well, there's this idea that we talk about called like the already but not yet. And so as Christians, we recognize that we have already been saved. We are those dim lights, but we are not yet fully glorified. We have not yet come to the full glory of the brilliance that we will be when we're fully united with Jesus. And as we walk through this life, we can recognize that when we're looking back at our old life, at the past, there's a lot of darkness. And we were characterized by darkness, but when we meet Jesus, we become light. And as we continue to walk closer and closer to Jesus, we get more and more light. And it's such a beautiful thing to see. So let's continue on. So that's the idea that we're talking about. And then we're going to get into some practicals. So verse 11, take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. For it is shameful even to speak of the things that they do in secret. Here's what Paul is saying. He's saying we need to so there's things in our life, he says, take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. There's darkness even as we walk through life, just like those dim lights, that is still not bright, or it's not fully exposed or revealed. And so what we need to recognize is as we walk through life, again, a lot of this is talking about pornography, this whole message, but any number of things could be dark in our life at any moment. And one of the things that we can do to bring light into the darkness is to expose those things. Instead of keeping them secret and hidden, expose them to the light. And as we continue reading, we'll see what that looks like. Verse 13, when anything is exposed by the light, it becomes visible. And for anything that becomes visible is light. Therefore it says, awake, O sleeper, and arise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. So what can we do? When anything is exposed by the light, it becomes visible, and anything that becomes visible is now light. One of the practices that this passage is encouraging us to do is to confess our sins to other people in our life, and to say, okay, there's this dark place in my life, and I need to bring that to light, bring that to a friend or a mentor or somebody who I can trust. Don't just shout your sins to the mountaintops. That's not appropriate in most circumstances. Be judicious and thoughtful about when or why or how you might do this. Like if you maybe need to have a conversation with your parents at some point about any number of things that are going on in your life. It takes a certain amount of tact and understanding to know how to approach the conversation, because the way you approach a conversation could go really poorly or really great, depending on how you use your words. But exposing this sin can be one of the best practices that we as Christians can do to help get rid of sin in our life, get rid of darkness, and stop Satan from isolating us and thinking that we are better off just continuing to try and trudge forward in whatever shame or guilt or fear that we have of bringing even these things to light. Because it might be a hard process, but it's always better on the other side. And Satan does not want us to recognize that. So one thing I'll say too is if you ever share something that is going on in your life and you are vulnerable and you're open about what's happening, you go to your friend and you say, hey, can I tell you something? I'm having a hard time with it. I need to invite you into this. You as a friend, one of the best and most healing things that you can do to your friend, this might sound kind of sappy or cheesy, but one of the best things that you can do is say this. Thank you for sharing with me the thing that you just shared with me. I know that it took courage and vulnerability to do so, but I want you to know that I still love you. I still care about you. And I feel like as guys, maybe more than girls, we shy away from that kind of language. And I think that our culture is turning a corner in the sense that I think we're becoming more okay with language like that. But if you tell your friend, hey, you just confessed something to me that was really hard, I want to recognize that that is a hard thing to do. I still love you. I still want to play Xbox with you. Like, it sounds dumb, but it's like, wow, that's really healing for me to hear, because I didn't know how you were going to respond, and I feel so welcomed by those words. It can be really healing for us to open our arms and just give your friend a hug and say, dude, I still care about you, and I want to walk through this with you. Don't excuse the sin, but just say, I'm here for you. We're walking through this together. And I think that's huge. It's been huge for me. It's been huge for friends that I've walked through things with. So where does that leave us tonight? Great question. Thanks for asking. We're forging forward, and there's things that we can do to help fight against some of the darkness that we might be walking through. So I have 7 things that I want to just throw up on the screen one at a time, just to give you some ideas of places where you can go tonight, so that if you feel stuck, you're like, what am I supposed to do? Who am I supposed to reach out to? So Gabe, you can throw up the first one. These are, what did I say? Resources for the journey ahead. So we got to gear up, because it's a long journey. And I'll say this too. If you, and I think most of you are in this boat, are struggling in some capacity with any amount of sexual desire, lust that you're trying to rein in, this is something that will be a journey that you walk for the rest of your life. It's not like one day you get married and all of your problems are solved because now you can finally have sex with somebody. No, I feel like that's what I thought until someone told me, that's not the case. And I was like, oh, that's good to know. And I'm married, and I'll say it didn't solve my problems. If anything, it just made them complicated in a different way. Because now you're managing this relationship with someone else, and you're still having to fight the same fight, because it's a personal fight that you fight. And I had a 72-year-old leader of my community group when I was in college, and he would also say the same thing. He was like, yep, there's still times where I'm on the computer, and he's like, something pops up and I have to make a decision. about what am I going to do. It's a journey. So here we go. Number 1, join or start an accountability group. I know some of you have already done this. I meet weekly with an accountability group where we talk through the same exact questions. We say, how have you met your goals for reading the Bible this week? How have you met your goals for praying and engaging with God in prayer? How has your heart been with lust in this area? How have you loved your wife this week? How have you invested in making disciples this week? Boom, boom, boom. We go down to all the questions because we want to continually be walking towards Jesus. This is one of the best things that you can do. Meet with some guys, and I'll say this too. I've seen students do this where it's like, yeah, let's join an accountability group, and you invite a bunch of people together, and then like 1 or 2 of the people in the group is like, I'm just here for like the good time, you know? And they're like, it's okay if I look at pornography. And you're like, why are you here? Like, if you don't care, just like, why, like, what's the point of you being here? I don't care if I read my Bible. Well, then what do you need accountability for? If you're going to get a group together, get a group of guys who want to run towards Jesus and run with them. I always love the running analogy, because if you bring someone into your running group who's like, I'm just going to jog, they're just going to weigh everyone else down. So find people who want to run towards Jesus and run with them. It'll only make you stronger, but don't bring the wrong people into it. Number 2, memorize verses. If you want to fill your mind with verses by memorizing them, it's some of the best things you can do is memorize verses that point you towards Jesus. In this realm, there's a handful of verses like Psalm 119, 9 through 10, 1 Corinthians 6, 18, and various others. You could even just Google like memory verses for like helping me fight against lust or something, and then boom, you'll get 10 off the bat. So memorize verses, and they'll pop into your mind when you're having a hard time, and they'll remind you, oh, like it's worth it. Keep fighting, and it'll help you forge ahead. Number 3, and this is something that I've dabbled with back and forth, but cut off internet access. One of the things that's helped me the best with the fight against pornography specifically is like on my phone, I do not have internet on my phone. I have an iPhone. You might think, how do you not have internet on your phone? Because I'm weird and I don't care. And people are like, hey, can you look something up for me? And I'm like, no, I can't. I'm like, I don't have internet. And my wife has a password for my phone because I'm like, look, I know that in my deepest heart, I will abuse the privilege. And so I'm like, I'm not going to go there. There's too much at stake. I'm not doing it. And so I get rid of it. That's not the only solution. Number 4 is like content blockers. You can go in that direction. If you're like, yeah, I want to fight against this, you can install software on your phone or your computer that helps block certain content that you're like, even if I tried to search for it, it'll block it out. Maybe it'll send a text to your friend and it'll be like, hey, why are you looking at this website? And they'll be like, I don't know, that's awkward. So you want to try and maybe like put a content blocker on your phone. That can be really helpful. Personally, I'm a fan of like, maybe we should be on our phones less, so maybe less internet is okay. And then I can have a conversation with someone and be like, I wonder when the Roman Empire fell. And I'll never know because I can't look it up. Okay, number 5. Porn-free. Okay, so this is an interesting one. This is a podcast that I think is helpful, and I just said, and other podcasts. Porn-free Radio is a podcast. This guy is a Christian. He puts out content, and I think it's really helpful because he really just cuts straight through, and he says, like, here's an example of something that like, could be a trigger that like starts this idea in your brain, and then you start like walking down this road, and then like 2 days later, you're like, how did I stumble and fall and like get to this point? And you're like, oh, it was when I saw that girl walking down the street and I like stared a little bit too long, and then I really dwelled on that thought, and then that just kind of took root and it grew, and then now I'm here. And it's like, oh, that's great. So he really calls stuff out. I think it's helpful. Porn-free Radio. You might find other podcasts or sermons or resources, but that can be really helpful. Even when you're in like a great spot, it just continues to encourage you to keep your mind on things that are good. There's another one here, fortified.com. I just found today. I've just put it in there as a resource because it seemed like it might be helpful. You want to throw that one up, Gabe? Fortify.com. I just like filled out an account to look it up. It seemed like it's sort of like an accountability structure online, if that's something that you're interested in looking into. You can check that out. I'm sure there's lots of websites. And then one final one is there's this website called Fight the New Drug. And they have a ton of resources. That's where I got most of like my quotes and statistics from. They just have a ton of stuff out there that's basically, again, not from a Christian perspective, but just like, this is a problem, and here's why. Like if you're like, you wake up tomorrow and you're like, I know this is something I should be fighting, but I don't remember why. Like, Fight the New Drug is a great website that can give you a ton of reasons, resources, articles, videos, things that just continually will remind you, like, yeah, this is not good. Because in the short term, you're going to think, this seems really desirable, and I don't know what to do. You want to remember the reason why you get up to fight against these things, because they are destructive in ways that are sometimes irrevocable in our lives. And so I want to help you guys prepare for that battle as you continue to walk through life. And again, I want to always remind you, if you do fall or stumble in any capacity, the church is a place where we come as broken people, recognizing that we want to walk towards Jesus together. This is not a place for you to come and pretend like your life is great, because my life's not great. Jesus is great in my life, and that's what I preach. So thank you guys for being here.